that has happened since I wrote up everything. Jan Gardner has been arranging for all these program meetings since 2010. He's done a really excellent job. And I'm really happy. And so she's retiring, but are you still coming?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm still gonna support the club.
Are you still making your brownies?
I'm making my brownies.
Okay. The rule is still right. So I got this whole thing. And I didn't know what to do with it. And I thought, maybe Jan might be the perfect person to get this. It's a little thing that you can put around your neck or whatever. And it came from Audubon.
Oh, nice.
It reminds me of polychaete. Where marine biologists and polychaetes are the equivalent, the marine equivalent to earthworms. But they are so diverse. They have frills on their heads, or they have little things between their legs. So you can put that, it tells you about how to use that.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Muted.
Oh, good, I'm glad you like it.
Yeah.
See,
Oh, I don't know what it is.
I'm muted.
You are, we can
So-
hear.
I was at the National Audubon's big conference. They do it every other year. And it was the first time I'd ever attended one of these things. And so I'll give you a quick go over, but in the January, February newsletter, I will be giving more detailed discussion of what went on. So other than bus failures, it all went smoothly. But basically, they had come up with an overarching concept of what they're calling it bend the curve. But since 1970, over 3 million birds have been, or 30 million, have been lost. 3 billion. I can get it in here. But a lot of birds have been lost. And so they finally, the light bulb goes on. The way to fix this is to work hard on providing more habitat. And I thought, well, this is perfect fit for us because we already have projects that are working on more habitat. For example, we partner with Rolling Hills Prep to create habitat for the endangered California butterfly. And how does that help birds? Birdies like to eat those blue butterflies. There was a great example of that on the military base there. The commander was out for her noontime jog, and the day before was a Sunday, and she'd seen the release of the butterflies. She's jogging along and she noticed there was a post with a whole bunch of little blue butterfly wings, minus the body. And she was so upset, she called Jana, who runs the program to culture them. And he said, the birds are eating the butterflies. And she was told, that's their role in life. So everything.
Everybody is lunch.
Everybody's lunch. Except for maybe us. So with that. There we go. We got a birdie. Speaking of birds. She doesn't eat butterflies, does she?
She was what?
Eat butterflies?
No, she doesn't. She watches them out of the window.
Okay, good. We're safe then. So I want to mention to you all upcoming events in our chapter. This Saturday is a beginner's birding excursion. And I just asked Jack if he could do it because the person who normally would do it has not replaced Jasmine yet. We're hoping to get that done the next month. So that starts at 7. If you have any even little ones that don't know a thing about birds or friends or anything, that's a good event to go. It is a holiday weekend, but we already have 2 women that are interested, so it's worthwhile. And then if you're really into the heavy duty birding, It's the First Sunday Bird Walk by Manuel Duran. How do you say his last name? Duran. He just goes by Duran. Okay. Really, really nice. And they take on anybody who doesn't know anything about birds and who know a lot of birds. There's something at all level, and all the guys that come are ready to handle somebody who's a beginner or intermediate and that they don't have binoculars. So that's a good event.
That's at Kenmore.
At Kimberly Park, yes. And then, how do you pronounce it? You say it with a French accent, the Montmots.
No, it's not much.
Montmots, okay. And where did that term come from?
There's a genus of birds in Central and South Africa, and South America. Where am I going next? I don't know. And the first one that I think was described, it's just around going, not.
That's cool.
The rest of them don't necessarily quite sound the same, but
Did it get picked up? Good. So now everybody's gonna know, whoever watches that. Montmots. I always think of the French word for word.
when we went, both of the times when we've been to Point Feely, there's been a car from Ontario parked in the parking lot with a license plate Montmot. And I left them a note the first time, and I said, "Is this for French or is this for Montmots?" And they said, "Both." And so I left them this message again the second time too.
That's great. I like that. Now I know. Now we all know. And then, Anne and Eric are gonna be doing a walk at Pollinators Creek. Ooh, that was earlier this month. It's Back Bay Newport. So I didn't get the date written down. You can go to our website. And we have a calendar there that's filled out. So I'm hoping to make the website a real functional tool for all the members. So give us a year. And then you'll find it heavier. So then, the big event of December is the Christmas bird count, the CBC. Everybody calls it the CBC, and it will take place on Saturday, December 23rd. Since I've become president, this is the first one I've been able to go. Well, actually, since before then, because my family, it's important out in Palm Desert. I've got a very creaky, wonderful stepfather. And so all of us kids are gonna be there this week for Thanksgiving. There'll be fewer people for Christmas. And we usually go out on the morning of the 25th and stay through the 27th. So you should be able to show up, right? And I mentioned the National Audubon leadership thing. Look for my article and the newsletter. And then January, February. So now this is, okay, we ready to move to our featured little known and seldom seen birds. And this is the four-toed snorkelbill. And I'm just gonna, you guys can probably read it faster than I can talk. So it's tentatively identified by its vertical bill, which moves rapidly, 2 to 3 inches of water on old fish beds with unusually high hatchling mortality rates. It seldom calls and its range varies. Observational hint. Take up a location in the dense Spartina tidal marsh on a calm day. Constant surveillance of the marsh fringes, you know what I was moving, may reveal what appears to be a short, erratically moving reed. This is either a four-toed snorkelbill or a short, erratically moving reed. So you can see, here's the four toes. Are there, woodpeckers are usually four-toed, right? There was one.
Parrots are four-toes.
Huh?
Parrots
Parrots are
are four-toed.
okay.
2 forward and 2 back.
All right. So I'm pretty ignorant, but ask me about polyp worms, I'm good. And then, of course, you can see is Merkelbill.
And where do we find this?
Well,
Spartina.
you need.
In the book.
Spartina tidal marsh. I don't know if any around here, you have to look the coast a bit. And constant surveillance of the marsh fringes may reveal what appears to be a short, erratically moving reed. It's either a four-toed snorkelbill or a short, erratically moving reed. So now we are further enlightened on the world of birds. And it's probably a good time then to introduce our speaker. Thanks for putting up with that. So this is Krystle Hickman. And I don't know if any of you got this onto her website, but amazing photographs. And she's going to talk about bees. And I love your photo of yourself. Did you do that?
No, my friend did, but it does look like a selfie.
Wow, you're really good. But I'm looking forward to this.
Okay, and that, and we're gonna switch cables.
So I don't need to do anything with the volume, right?
No, you shouldn't have to. Keep your laptop muted.
Is that coming across on this?
Yeah, it sure is.
Oh, here you go.
Okay, you should be able to share screen now and share your
Oh, it's
PowerPoint.
I have a second screen apparently. I didn't know about that. So sharing screen too. Instead of sharing wireless. Well, I know that screen too, because when it asked me to do a display, it said screen 1 or screen 2. That's all right. People online can see the chat.
Would you like the lights lowered?
Oh, I'm fine unless anyone else wants to like for it. The setup is a little bit different than what I'm used to, so hopefully I don't mess this up on the first slide. All right, so thank you so much for having me. My name is Krystle Hickman. I am a conservation photographer. I specialize in the field of militology, which is the study of native bees. So I'm just going to start off by telling you guys a little bit about myself, how I got started, and why I do what I do. So as you can see right here, these are 3 things that I primarily do. I'm up here just to talk about bees today, but I'm also an artist as well as a speaker, which you can tell because I'm up here speaking. Regarding my artwork, I work with ballpoint pen and sugar. In the upper
In sugar?
yes, in the sugar, yes.
How does that work?
So the upper right hand corner is sugar. So I paint a canvas black and I lay sugar out into a shape so it looks like a monochromatic art piece. So it's like black and white. And the rest of them are ballpoint pens. So yeah, that's what I've.
Wait, is the sugar, is that temporary then, or?
So it was initially temporary. I would wipe it away and record it, but then people wanted to start buying it. So I had to figure out like a glue mixture to actually keep it on there permanently. So now that it is permanent, yes. Unless it's in a video, then I wipe it away.
So it's kind of 3D too, right?
It's a little 3D. I would say it wouldn't go more than like 3 millimeters off of the canvas. Thank you. Okay, also speaker, you can tell. And regarding what I'm here to talk about today, I also photograph bees. So I primarily photograph 3 things in relation to bees: the bees themselves, also the plants that they visit, as well as their ecosystems. So primarily, I photograph around California, but
Perfect.
all right, so primarily I photograph bees in California, but also if you look at the lower left-hand corner there, that's clearly not California. That's in Belize, in Orange Walk. So yeah, I actually travel out of the country. I started doing that last year to photograph bees, and this was my first out of the country trip. All right, so a lot of people call what I do citizen science work, but I call myself a community scientist. So they're basically the same thing, but if you don't know what either of those are, community scientist is a scientist who conducts scientific research in a field that they don't have a degree in. And politically, the last couple of years, the word citizen has changed a lot from a non-scientist to someone who is documented versus non-documented. So to be more inclusive, instead of saying citizen scientist, now we say community scientist. So again, what I do, I photograph bees in their environments, document their behavior, I also notate plants that they're on, and I keep track of things like times, dates, and weather. Every single location that I visit, I actually have an Excel sheet that I update every single year, and I keep track of the bees that are there, so I'm able to see what's changing with the weather as well, which is really interesting year after year. So how I got started.
Is there a central location where you submit your data?
I'm keeping it mostly to myself, but just because of some of the observations I made were completely new observations, so I'm starting to write some articles, and hopefully my first one will be published this year, but we have like a month left, so maybe not. But yeah, I'm working on 3 different articles right now. Yeah. So how I got started, has anyone seen this quote before? Yeah, so if the bee disappeared off the surface of the globe, then man would only have 4 years of life left. No more bees, no more pollination, no more plants, no more animals, no more man. And that's attributed to Albert Einstein.
Wow.
Yeah, so I know some of you guys had seen that quote before. How many people know it's not true? Okay, we got one person here. So when I first read it, I thought it was true, and I actually believed that for quite a long time.
There's a lot of
yeah, exactly.
they put his name on a lot of
They
things
put his
that,
name on a lot. There's a lot of Einstein quotes.
It's not true.
The whole thing.
Oh,
Actually, so Einstein never said it, and the quote's not true. Someone actually made this up on the internet in the late 90s. And if you're all familiar with Einstein, he passed away in 1955, so there's a little gap between passing away and saying this. But yeah, like a lot of people, I read this, I thought it was true. I also thought it was about honeybees. So I actually spent a lot of time, can you see my, I think I can see everything. There we go. So I actually went out into the wild, I guess, outside, and I started taking pictures of bees that I thought needed to be saved, which were honeybees. So this is when I was going out with my cell phone. So I just took a lot of pictures of bees, and you notice they're just honeybees. So a lot of pictures of just honeybees.
So how long do we have?
For what?
Till all the bees disappear?
Well, that is a good question. I don't think anyone can give you an actual answer for it.
Einstein wasn't right. No, I know it wasn't even.
He wasn't wrong.
Whoever did, yeah,
Whoever
I mean,
said it, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, so I guess
it might be less.
so I guess to break that quote down for you a little bit more to explain why it's not true. So that quote is primarily about pollination. And if bees, a lot of bees that have a lot of bees will have symbiotic relationships with plants, meaning they'll only pollinate one, could be species, genus, or family of plants. If that bee disappears, that plant might disappear, not guaranteeing that it will disappear. But also those plants are not plants that we rely on for food. So if you actually want to break it down, it's not if bees disappear, it's if insects disappear. And it's not because of just pollination, it's also because there's a lot of creatures that rely on insects just for food, and there's a lot of creatures that rely on those other insects for, you know, it's just kind of on and on up the food chain. But it's also really hard to quantify what would actually happen. So you can't put like a 4-year number on it, because who knows what it would be. There's definitely creatures that would disappear. There's who knows what would happen. It's really hard to predict. But yeah, if the bees disappear, it would not be a positive thing for nature, but people would not disappear in 4 years.
yay.
Yay. Cool.
So that all works.
Yes, okay. So yeah, I was taking those pictures of all of those honeybees, and then I took this picture. And it's clearly a bee, but it's not a honeybee. And I was like, okay, this is really interesting. what kind of bee is this? So at the time, I thought beekeepers would be experts. So I went to my beekeeping friends and I was like, hey, what kind of bee is this? And they didn't know. And I ended up going to Facebook of all places. And there was a group that was full of a bunch of entomologists and militologists, which were bee experts. And this was also the first time I'd ever seen the word militologist or militologist. And they identified this bee really quickly as an Andrena bee, which is a mining bee. And they told me that this was also a native bee. And it was the first time I'd heard the word native bee or the phrase native bee. So a native bee, just like native plants, means they originate from where they currently reside. And they also told me that it was actually native bees, not honeybees, that were the ones that were potentially threatened or endangered. So this actually changed my whole mindset because I was like, wow, I spent a lot of time photographing honeybees. I didn't even know there were native bees. So I was like, okay, I got to go out there and photograph these native bees. So I ended up going to the same places I'd gone to photograph the honeybees, but for whatever reason, I wasn't finding the native bees. And I had absolutely no idea why. And I spent a long time looking for them. And I knew they were out there, but I just couldn't figure out why. I wasn't seeing them. And that brings me to the Crescent Farm, which is about an acre of garden at the LA Arboretum, which you guys should definitely check out. It's really wonderful. The horticulturalist there, his name's John Lasco. He's a really great guy. He took some pictures of bees that he'd seen in one day, about 5 different species, and they were posted on Facebook. And I was like, okay, this is really weird. Why are there so many native bees here and I haven't seen them? So I went to the garden, and my very first day there, I took these photos. And it became pretty obvious when I was there why there were so many native bees. It's because this acre of area is full of native plants. So native plants attract native bees. So I know a lot of you guys know this already, so I'm just going to go through it anyway. Well, what is a native plant? A plant is considered native if it occurred naturally in a particular region, ecosystem, or habitat where it currently resides without human introduction. So that can mean a plant is native to the entire United States, it could be native to California, or even an area as small as your zip code. So native plants and native bees. Native plants can potentially have a symbiotic relationship with native fauna, so they rely on each other to survive. So save the native bees also means save the native plants. So I know I was talking to a couple of you guys before, we have native yards. That's a great thing for bees, butterflies, so many different creatures. So saving the native plants helps save so many pollinators, not just native bees. It also helps birds, bats, butterflies, beetles, etc. And also I want to give you guys a breakdown of the differences between honeybees and native bees, because I feel like a lot of times people get the facts mixed up because they just use bees in general instead of specifying. So first off, honeybees are not threatened or endangered. Native bees are potentially threatened or endangered. Honeybees, the ones that are in the US, are from Europe. Native bees are from where they currently reside. So again, just like native plants, it could be native to the entire United States, California, or even their zip code. Honeybees drink water provided by people. Native bees get all of their hydration from plants, so you don't need to put water out for them. Honeybees are generalist pollinators, meaning they'll try and pollinate everything. And a lot of times people think that's really great because they're like, oh, they're pollinating everything. But they don't actually pollinate anything all that well. They have about a 5% pollination rate, so it's pretty low. So native bees can also be generalist pollinators, but they can also be specialist pollinators, meaning they'll pollinate, I know I said this before, but a species, genus, maybe even a whole family of plants. Honeybees are also detrimental to native bees. So this is in a couple of different ways. They can out-compete native bees for resources. So if you go out in the mornings when it's cooler, you'll see a lot of honeybees out earlier. You'll also see them out later. They're actually taking a lot of resources before a lot of native bees can actually get out. Another thing too, honeybees actually have a virus they get from a mite called a varroa mite, which is also from Europe. And it basically gives them deformed wing virus, but there's some honeybee adults that are carriers, so they're not physically affected by it. So they'll actually go out, they'll pollinate plants, and while they're going out, they're actually spreading the infection or the virus to these flowers. And it's been found that bumblebees visiting these same plants will actually take this pollen back to their hive, developing bees eat pollen. So we're actually starting to see bumblebees with the deformed wing virus or small wings. So if you ever see these videos out, I know I've seen them on social media with bumblebees with very tiny wings, it's because of their proximity to honeybees. One way to help prevent that from happening is to increase the biodiversity in your area. So give bees more options to visit. Also, I'll get into this a little bit later, but native bees are also threatened by climate change. Honeybees live in colonies. Native bees, about 70% are ground nesting, 30% are cavity nesting, and 90% are solitary. All right, so I know a lot of you guys know this. Yes,
What is ground nesting exactly?
they nest in the ground. So they'll dig a little hole in the ground, or they'll live in a cavity in the ground.
Oh,
Yeah.
you could be walking on them.
You could be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's actually really cute. Some of them will actually close up the entrance to their burrow when they're in there, just to kind of disguise it, which is kind of cute. So,
Thank you.
yeah, no problem. So this is a taxonomic tree of classifying organisms. I think I put the 8 main categories for classifying organisms here. I just included this because I'm going to be saying a lot of scientific names. And since I know a lot of you guys are already in the plants, I'm sure you guys know these already, but I just included the ones for people. So our common name is people or humans. Our scientific name is Homo sapiens. So Homo is our genus, sapiens is our species. So normally when we say it, like 2 Latin names, typically we're saying the genus and the species. So an example of that, this is a Perdita nasuta. So Perdita is the genus, nasuta is a species. So it's like when you're talking about bumblebees, it's always a bee in the genus Bombus. If you're talking about a honeybee, it's always a bee in the genus Apis. So this bee is also really cool. This is my very first contribution to community science. I was driving around Death Valley and pulled over on the side of the road when I saw this buckwheat, which was really pretty. And there was this very tiny bee. This bee is about 4 millimeters, just flying around. And if you look at the bee in the lower left-hand corner, he has a little, it looks like a duckbill on his face. It's called a quipius. A way a lot of bee research is done is they put out pan traps. So they'll put out like a pan or something that has some sort of liquid in it. Things will fly into it and they'll die. And then deceased specimens are studied. So because no one had actually looked at these alive, no one knew what that facial feature was for. So since I was out there looking at these guys live, I actually got a photo of the male using that facial feature. So what he's actually doing is he's trapping the female's antennae on either side of that previous facial feature, so she can't fly off, and he's trying to mate with her. So wow, really positive facial feature, but also it's really cool. Like anyone who's involved in community science who has a camera can make a really cool discovery like this. And what was also really interesting about this buckwheat is everything on it had really similar colors. So these are a couple of different creatures that were on it. And what's also really cool about this is this bee has a specialist relationship with this Eriogonum inflatum. So if you want to look for the bee, you look for the flower. So if the flower is blooming, that also means the bee is potentially out. So specialist pollinators, this was the actual first one that I looked for by looking for the plant. And this is called a Caliopsis puae. It's on the desert dandelion, and I photographed this one in Red Rock in the Mojave Desert. And it's really interesting. Pretty much anytime you see this bee, it's on this flower. And a lot of times the way you can actually identify a bee, sometimes the species even, is by the flower. So if you have pretty good knowledge of flower, you can potentially ID the bee, which is really cool. This was another one that I found by looking for the symbiotic relationship. So this is called a Perdita minima, and it is the smallest known bee in North America. It's potentially the smallest bee in the world. And if you look at the quarter in the lower left-hand corner, you can see the flower on there. So the bee is about a little under 2 millimeters. It's about the size of a letter on a quarter. And you can tell the males from the females apart. The females in the upper picture, she has pollen on her back legs that she's taking back to her burrow. She's a ground nesting bee. And then there's the male who is the yellow. So yeah, if you want to find this bee, look for the sand gnat, which is the plant. Another thing that's really cool about this is there's a bee that's known as a bee that's difficult to ID the species, so no one ever tries. A lot of times they just identify it by the subgenus, which is Dialectus. And what's really cool is because cameras are getting so much better now, you can actually take photos of these. And this was the first Dialyctus that I actually got ID'd to species. And they're so difficult to ID, people don't even put keys out for identification. I just sent this photo, or a couple of the photos to the Dialyctus expert, and they're like, oh, it's this one. But yeah, I think it's just really cool how far like technology is coming. It could definitely help with community science. And what's really cool about this too, so this sand mat was actually in a neighborhood on a sidewalk. It was about 2 square feet. And what's really cool about this area is it's a whole ecosystem. So a lot of times when people think of ecosystems, they'll think of like an entire desert or a forest or a mountain range, but it could just be a tiny section of plants. And all of these creatures lived on it. What's also really cool is the center photo. That is a mite. It is the fastest land animal on Earth relative to its size. It's about 0.5 to 0.7 millimeters. And if it was the size of a person, it'd run about 1,300 miles an hour. So really fast, opposed to a cheetah, which runs about 60. And it doesn't have a common name, otherwise I'd use it, but it's called a Paratarsodamus macropalpus. And I made a little documentary, which hopefully plays on this, of the sand mat and what lives there. I think my volume's off,
Yeah.
so it's a silent movie. So that's one of the wasps that lives on there, and she was very cooperative. So I got a lot of footage of her and some photos as well. So that's a carpenter ant. And she looks really huge compared to everyone else, and there's a little honey pot ant as well. And then coming up in the lower left-hand corner is the Perdita minima. And what's really cool about this bee, you can kind of see her doing it. She actually puts pollen on her chest while she's collecting it, and then she goes into a tripod stance where she stands up on her back legs, and then she packs the pollen on her back legs. So you can see her doing that. Yeah.
Why did she do that?
Why does she put the pollen on her chest? I think it's just an easier way for her to collect it without like having, I don't know. Temporary storage. But yeah, it's also one way you can actually identify these bees. So Perdita do this, so do Coleopsis. So if you see a bee kind of standing up like that, you can potentially figure out the genus.
This is a documentary, so we just on the centennial area.
Oh, I made this.
Oh, you did that?
Yeah.
Marvelous.
Yeah. This was just me laying on a sidewalk in a neighborhood.
People walking by, what's this crazy lady?
I mean, yeah, actually, yeah. Actually, one of the neighbors came out the second year I was there, and he like looked at the bees with me, which was really cool. Yeah, the first year he thought I was kind of weird, and the second year he was like, oh, okay.
The wings are iridescent.
Yes, I noticed that. Yeah, they reflect a lot of light. They're actually completely clear. It's just the veneration that kind of curves on them.
They're rainbow.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's good. It's done.
Very nice.
That little area, I mean.
Yeah, that's very small. Yeah, so I actually make a lot of like small documentaries on micro ecosystems just because I think it's really interesting. But like I'll get into this later, but like just one sunflower can be a whole ecosystem, which is really cool. So symbiotic relationships don't just exist in the bee world, they also exist in the wasp world. So just like you can identify some bees by the flower they're visiting, you can also do the same thing with wasps. but they also don't exist just in the insect world. This one's, I feel like a lot of people really know this one just because of Finding Nemo. But this is a clownfish and a sea anemone. So they have a symbiotic relationship with the clownfish, attracts a lot of food for the sea anemone to eat. The clownfish has a coating on its body so it can't get stung. It gets protection so it doesn't get eaten by a lot of larger things. So yeah. So climate change and symbiotic relationships, because climate change really does impact these. So I know this seems kind of random bringing up koalas in a bee presentation, but I feel like this is one that people are really familiar with. I think it was 2019, 2020. There was a giant oceanic temperature gradient. It happens every single year, but because climate change really exacerbated it, what happened was there was a lot of drought in Australia, and I know it wasn't on the news as much, but there was a lot of flooding in Eastern Africa. So basically what happened, because it was so dry in Australia, there were a lot of fires, and koalas only eat eucalyptus leaves. So a lot of the eucalyptus leaves burn. So the koalas that survived the fire, a lot of them actually started starving to death because they had absolutely nothing to eat. And koalas are really cute, fluffy. They're also really large. People aren't worried about being stung by them. So they were like, oh, let's try and save the koalas. And a lot of people jumped into action to do that. But the same thing is actually happening with other creatures like bees that people might not necessarily like as much. They're not as cute and fluffy to a lot of people. So this is just kind of an example of what's happening. And also I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, the main reason for the decline in bee species was land loss, but it changed to climate change actually. So what can we do? There's a lot of things we can do, but I feel like the two easiest things, one, document to raise awareness. We all have cameras. There's an app called iNaturalist, which I'll show you guys in a second. I'm sure a lot of you guys have that already. You can take pictures with your camera. Also plant native plants in your yard. So this is iNaturalist. I created some bee projects on here. So California native bees and Los Angeles native bees. I did this because usually when people take photos of bees and put them on iNaturalist, it's honeybees. So I wanted to eliminate those. So if you want to find native bees that are in your area, look up those two groups or those two projects. So it brings me to Arlington Garden in Pasadena. This is a really great garden. It's free to visit anytime. It's always open. There's this bee here. It's a very common bee. It's called a Xylocopa sonorina. It's a male carpenter bee. I hadn't seen this bee at the garden for years, and I actually thought it was no longer there. But Arlington Garden did a what did they do? It was a nature walk, and someone took a photo of a male flying by. So if it was just me out there looking, I would think this bee is no longer around there. So this is an example of kind of what's happening with militology. There's not a lot of people looking. So since there's not a lot of people looking, there's things that we could definitely miss. So that's why I always encourage more people to get into community science, because you might make really cool discoveries just snapping a photo like that one. Santa Monica Mountains, one of my absolute favorite places to visit. Like I was saying before, you can actually predict what bees are out based on what flowers are out. So if you see morning glories, which is kind of early spring, I would say, this is one of the bees that actually has a relationship with it. This is a female Diadacia bituberculata. She's a ground nesting bee. This is a couple keeping the population going. And I think these photos are just really cute. So the female creates a turret or like a chimney-like structure, because there's a lot of creatures that are parasites or parasites, parasitoids of this bee. They'll like go in there, try and lay an egg and consume her larva. So she creates these little chimneys to protect her brood from being killed. And the photo on the right, I just think that's really cute. So that's a female who actually is in her turret, but she can't fit all the way down. She has a lot of pollen on her back legs, so those are her little feet sticking out. Yeah, I just think it's cute. But yeah, normally they can go all the way down. So this is not a video that I did. My friend James Carey did this. So if you ever go to Satwiwa in the Santa Monica Mountains, he's the guy who's basically laying on the ground for about 3 months. He's been there for 5 years. But he makes these really cool videos, which hopefully plays. There we go. So this is an aggregation of ground nesting solitary bees. So a lot of times people would look at this and go, oh, these aren't solitary, they're in a group. So these are called solitary bees because this is like an aggregation is like a neighborhood. So each one of those little turrets is their own house. So they have their individual houses in a neighborhood. And there's only one female bee per house. And males actually don't sleep in the houses. They sleep inside of the morning glories.
So the males come and visit or what?
The males try and mate with the females when they collect pollen. So a lot of male bees spend their entire adult life just hanging around flowers waiting for females to show up.
These are all diadaceae.
Yeah, they do.
And where, this is in the Santa Monica Mountains?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is in, there's two locations, there's Stat-Weewa, and this is in the Michi-Mokoa Trailhead parking lot.
But, so the males aren't in those little, you know, scrub, where do the males sleep? They sleep by a flower?
They sleep in flowers,
In
so,
flowers.
yeah, so a lot of flowers actually open and close with the sun. And males will go into them right before the sun goes down and the flower will close around the male bee, and then when the sun comes up, the flower will open, will fly out.
Be careful when you sniff. Well.
Yeah, be careful. Well, actually, males don't have stingers, so you could keep sniffing them.
Oh.
Yeah, so you're fine. I'm sure they wouldn't like it, but
They don't smell.
But females have stingers,
all female bees have stingers. Even stingless bees have stingers, which is,
even native bees. Okay.
yeah, so all female bees have stingers. These are two other bees that will also show up when with the morning glory. So we have a Eucera, which is a longhorn bee, as well as a Bifora. And the Bifora is actually sleeping in the flower. So two other like early season flowers. We have Asteraceae as well as deerweed. So when these flowers show up, you'll start to see these bees. And I put these side by side so you can kind of differentiate between male and female. So the top two bees are called Anthophora. This is I don't know if you guys can, no, my mouse is not there. Okay, so the gray bee at the top in the left corner, that's an Anthophora edwardsii. And you can tell she's a female because she has puffy hair on her back legs. That's where she carries the pollen. Also, she doesn't have the clippiest facial feature. She has a lot of fur there. And the male on the right, he has that clippiest, that facial plate. So that's a great way to tell males. Also, he doesn't have that puffy back leg. If you look at his middle leg, he has a little fan there. So they actually use that during mating to either cover the female's eyes or their antenna. And then lower left-hand corner, so this one looks really similar. This is actually a Habercoda, but you can see he has the clippiest facial feature, so that's a male. The lower right-hand corner, that's a Hoplites bee. She doesn't actually collect pollen on her back leg, she collects pollen on the underside of her abdomen. Some other bees that'll show up at the same time. So upper left-hand corner, this is called a Brachymolectica californica. And this is a kleptoparasitic bee. So this bee is a parasite of another bee. So it'll actually go into the burrow of a host bee, lay an egg, their egg will hatch, and it'll consume either the egg or the larva of the host bee and eat all the pollen as well. Then on the right there, we have, this is actually a male who doesn't have a clippiest facial feature, but he's a Medicaile. He's a leaf cutter bee. Lower left-hand corner, that's another Hoplites. You can see the pollen on the underside of her abdomen. Lower right-hand corner is an Osmia male. So Osmia males have a lot of facial hair. They also have longer antennae than the females. So climate change close to home. This is the Santa Monica Mountains. And what's really, I know this looks really brown, but it's half the year. It's absolutely beautiful. But because it's so beautiful, it's actually a biodiverse hotspot, and people have been moving there just because it is so beautiful. But because of that and climate change, there's more fires and people are worried about that. So they've actually started asking to do fire abatement from a conservancy there. So this was actually an area that I've been visiting for about 6 months. And then I think it was the week of the 4th of July when a tractor came through and actually cut down all of the plants that were there. And what's really sad about this is I never actually took a photo of what it looked like before all the plants were cut down. And this was a really great area too, because before this happened, there was actually, I think I saw about 41, 42 different species of bees. But after that, I didn't see any. And then I went back the following year. I was like, okay, maybe the bees will show up again. Some of the flowers started regrowing, but then they came through with the tractor again. So I wanted to show you guys some of the bees that actually I photographed at this exact spot. And I think this started happening, well, I noticed it 3 years ago, but I had not seen a single bee there since. So this is another thing that's happening with land loss. and climate change combined.
Are they able to go to a different area close by that has some plants or?
So they can keep moving, but they're basically gonna be abandoning burrows or whatever was there. They can keep restarting. But the problem is, there's not always infinite spaces for them to move to. And a lot of them also, a lot of the smaller ones especially, they don't travel as far. Sometimes they actually live right at the base of the plant that they visit. So if that plant is gone, then the bee possibly will have options to go other places, but maybe not.
Can you not report this somewhere?
So actually, my friend was the first one who noticed it because, what was it? I think, was it called a Mariposa lily? I think it was. She had been documenting some Mariposa lilies and a tractor came through and said endangered or vulnerable plant. And, yeah, so basically the Santa Monica Mountains is aware of it. But because the people living there are asking them to do it, it's gonna keep happening year after year. But yeah, they're aware of it. So, yeah, but yeah, my friend who saw the Mariposa lily cut down was one of the first people to like bring it up. But yeah, so California is actually a biodiversity hotspot. And this map came out last year. I think it's a really great map. It shows where a lot of biodiversity is in America. So a lot of times with biodiversity maps, they actually look at a lot of larger creatures that people are more so interested in. So they ignore things like insects, a lot of like wolves, smaller creatures as well. So if you notice here, California is deep red. That's because we have a lot of biodiversity. So yeah, this kind of goes into some of the animals that are normally left off these biodiversity lists. And one thing that we'll see if this happens, but about 13% of the United States is protected right now. Biden put in an initiative to do 30 by 30, which is protect 30% of the US by 2030. So fingers crossed, hopefully that happens. But yeah, if you notice here, all these green areas are Mediterranean climates. So we actually live in a Mediterranean climate, and Mediterranean climates are biodiversity hotspots. They take up about 2% of Earth's land, but they also have a little over 20% of Earth's biodiversity. So here, and one thing that's really interesting about Mediterranean climates is most other places get summer rainfall, we get winter rainfall. Also, Mediterranean climates are typically on the western side of the continent. There's typically a mountain range and a desert as well. Oh, and I guess to kind of give you like a translation of how that works with bees. So in the US, there's a little over 4,000 species of bees. In California, we have about 1,400. So we have a large population of the species that are in the United States. So the San Gabriel Mountains, this is another place that I really love to visit. This is a bee that actually lives on the side of a cliff. This is called an Anthophora bomboides. And my friend actually recorded this video. So we actually went hiking with a ladder. And I ended up, it was only 6 feet and they were 12 feet up. So I climbed up to the top of the ladder and then had to scale up even higher to take those photos that I just showed you.
What drones are for?
I mean, that would be a good idea. I don't have one of those, but yeah.
Wow, it is.
It's yeah, so each one of those
It's
little.
like swallowness.
Yeah. And what's really cool is you can keep going back to the same spot year after year and you'll see this colony. So my first big trip for bees was at Trinity Alps. This was 2 years ago. And I actually went up there to look for this bee. This is called a Bombus franklini. California has 4 endangered bumblebees, and one of my goals was to photograph all 4 of them. I've only photographed one. This was supposed to be my second one. And it was kind of a crazy backpacking trip because I thought I was in really great shape. And it was only 9 miles. And I had a 30-pound bag, but it was like straight up a mountain. And we basically went in like a mile an hour. And it was probably one of the worst trips I've ever been on. But when we actually got to the meadow, it was absolutely beautiful. So we went on a expedition there to try and find the bee. Because the last time the bee was officially seen is in this photograph, August 2006. And we ended up not finding the bee. I've gone on a couple of other trips to try and find it, still no luck. But what's really cool is I actually photographed this bee. So this is called the Lasiaglossom cymbrialicus, and this is the first photo of a living specimen representative of the species. It's also the first sighting post 2000. It's a high elevation specialist, so you have to go high up in the mountains to see it. So didn't find the bumblebee, but found this really cool bee instead. This is a bee that I found in the central grassland in Yolo County, near San Francisco, Davis area. So this bee is really cool. It's also the first photo of a living specimen, or a living representative. This is called a brachynomata, and it's a really, really rare bee. And what's cool about this is another contribution to community science that I had, because if you actually look at the key for this bee, no one knew what it was a parasite of. But because I was out there looking, just hanging around, I actually found that this is the host bee. So it was also a new location for the brachynomata as well. And this is also the, I think it's the first sighting since like the, I can't remember off the top of my head, I was gonna say 60s, but maybe not. But yeah, so again, just going out into nature, you can find really cool things. And what's also really amazing about this is that bee was right in front of my parking spot. Like I was literally just like parked by the sign, and I was just looking around at dusk, because like sometimes bees just sleep on plants. And then I saw this one and I knew it was a parasite, could not figure out what it was, but finding the host bee really helped. So it was really cool. My first overseas trip or across land trip was to Belize. And I went there specifically to find a crepuscular bee. So this is a bee that flies about 90 minutes before dawn, 90 minutes after dusk. And it had never been seen in this location before, also not this time of year, but I was like, you know what, I don't have a lot of chances to go to Belize, so I might as well go and try and find this bee. So I ended up setting up 2 light traps. I just got 2 towels from my hotel room, and I hung them up on clothes hangers in the forest, and I put a black light on one and a flashlight on the other. And within 10 minutes, the bee showed up on the towel with the flashlight, which was just like crazy. And me and my friend ended up going and celebrating, and I thought it was like a really big thing because he got me this huge drink, but it was like $2. So I didn't know that until the last day I was there, otherwise I would have gotten some more. But yeah. So on to Borrego, in the Mojave Desert. This is another place I absolutely love to visit. So this bee is called a Megachile brownie. Until last year, this was the only photo of a living representative, but someone else took a photo, so now there's 2. But with the other photo, I think there's only 4 observations post 2000. So this is a really rare bee. And I actually went to this plant, it's called a smoke bush or a Sorthamus. And I went there looking for another bee that's rare. It's also in the desert, didn't end up finding it. But I photographed this one, and I didn't realize that it hadn't been photographed before. So I was like, oh, I got to go back and get better photos. And the issue was, when I went there the first day, it was about 110 degrees. I couldn't go back for another 7 days. So every single day that week, it had been over 110. And also everything was dying. It was like super dry. And the day I went back, it was actually on the 4th of July. And this is what the plant normally looks like, really beautiful. This is what it looked like when I went there. And this is actually it blooming. And when I got there, the second day, it actually hit 117. I opened my door and there was just this loud hum. And keep in mind, this is in the middle of the desert. And it was honeybees. Honeybees were swarming all over this bush. And when I was there the first day, I saw about 4 different species, I think, of native bees, about 100 different individuals. When I came back, didn't see any, just honeybees. And I was like, you know what, I missed my chance to see this bee. But it wasn't on the forecast. These like dark clouds showed up, and it started raining, and it rained for like 5 minutes, and all of the humming completely just disappeared. It was completely silent. And when the rain stopped after 5 minutes, this double rainbow showed up, and I decided to walk around the 2 trees that were blooming a little bit, and I photographed this one individual.
There you go.
And that was the only native bee I actually saw that day. So that's a combination of climate change and also honeybees getting out into nature. And what's interesting about this was I photographed this bee 3 years ago, and I've been visiting the same tree every single year. It has not flowered since that year. So I haven't seen any native bees in the area. This was 2 years ago, so it's 2021. So native landscaping. This is my friend Paloma's yard. She posted this picture on Instagram, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to come to your house. So I did. We'll get into native landscaping a little bit. I don't know if anyone's familiar with watershed approach. That's perfect. Okay, so what is watershed approach? It's basically a land area that drains to a common waterway, so there's a stream, lake, estuary, wetland, aquifer, or even the ocean. You can see here the areas with the large stones, those are actually lower than the places that have like the plants on them. So the water is actually draining into those areas. So it's a way of water collection. So there's 3 key principles. One is to build healthy living soil that is biologically diverse and to develop a sponge-like structure. So spongy soil will help hold and release rainwater, cycling carbon, nutrients, promoting biodiversity for plant resiliency. And also, I'd say the key to native landscaping is having healthy soil. So if you don't have the healthy soil, it's really hard to have healthy things living on top of that. So you should have a lot of things like earthworms, bacteria, fungi, leafhoppers, a lot of different things, arthropods. Also treat rainwater as a resource. So retention can be accomplished by creating small divots that you see here, like basins, contours. Impermeable surfaces can be made permeable or used as capture areas for redirection of water into landscape. Also, rain barrels can be used to store water. I think about an inch of rain can give you like 100 gallons or maybe a little bit more of water. So if you're in a drought, you're fine. But also native landscaping, the plants are more likely to be more resilient to the ecosystem that they're currently in. Also, plant native flora.
I'm sorry, did you go? Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. All right, so that's a Paloma's yard. So these are some bees that I photographed in her yard. So we have a in upper left-hand corner, that is a Xylocopa sonorina, which is the female to the orange one that we saw earlier at Arlington Garden. You also have a Agapostemon texanus, which is a green sweat bee. We have the osmia in the lower left-hand corner. Again, he has the facial hair, so that's how you can tell he's a male. And then we also have a Halictus farinosus, which is another female sweat bee. And she collects pollen on her back legs.
That shimmering green in the top right, that is.
Yeah, I have really cool bees. So yeah, that's a bee.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So that's a bee that could show up in everyone's yard. But what's really cool about Paloma's yard is she has this bee. So this bee is called a Perdita interrupta, and it's a really uncommon bee. So it has a symbiotic relationship with poppies, but it also has a symbiotic relationship with Cryptantha, which is a popcorn flower. So any bee or insect that has a symbiotic relationship with poppies also has to have a symbiotic relationship with another plant because poppies don't produce nectar. So basically what happens with bees is the males spend their entire adult life on the flower waiting for a female to show up. They mate with the female, you can see, and the female collects pollen from them. But yeah, this is a really rare bee, which is really cool. So not only does she have a rare bee, she also has an endangered bee in her yard. I actually photographed this one at the Crescent Farm at the LA Arboretum, but after I visited Paloma's yard, she ended up hanging out there taking photos of bees, and she photographed the same species. So I think that's really cool. It's a great example of what you can do in your yard.
Is she in the bees also?
She is now. Yeah. She's it's funny because her I did a class with Theodore Kane, and it was a 3-part class. The last part of it was in her backyard. She has such a great ecosystem, and she has kids. I think they're 7 and 8. The 8-year-old ended up. Oh, you had.
I was on that class.
Oh, okay, yeah. So yeah, her 8-year-old ended up teaching the 3rd part of the class because I just like knew so much, and I was like, okay, well, and he was really good. So I was like, yeah, everyone was very into it. She has really smart kids stuff. So yeah. So maintaining a native environment. One thing that's really great about this is you don't need any or very few pesticides or herbicides because a native ecosystem will naturally keep a healthy balance within it. So pesticides, obviously, they kill insects that benefit plants. Herbicides kill plants that benefit insects, but they also harm more than they just their intended targets. So let's say Paloma, for whatever reason, didn't like that California poppy bee, that fruity that interrupt us, so she sprayed pesticides. Who's gonna pollinate the poppies? Let's say for some reason she didn't like the poppies, she sprayed herbicides. What's gonna happen to the bee? So they have more than just their intended target. So I like to bring up some insects that I call indicator insects. So if you have these in your yard, they're an indication that you have a really healthy ecosystem. They're indicator insects because they rely on other creatures to survive. So this is a wasp that is really, really tiny. A lot of people won't even see that it's normally in their yard. You can actually see him in the upper right-hand corner next to a quarter. So he's really, really tiny. And there he is at another one at Arlington Gardens. So they also have a really good ecosystem.
So
So,
they attracted to Encelia or a diverse amount of them?
I don't know if they have a relationship with any plants in particular, but they do have a relationship with aphids. So the way the relationship works is the females do something called ovipositing. So they'll stick a little egg into the body of an aphid, and the aphid's body will swell up like this, basically becomes a cocoon or a mummy. And then when the wasp is an adult and ready to close or exit, they'll shoot a little hole out the back of the aphid and pop out, and they control the population of aphids.
Yeah.
So I know people don't like aphids in, yeah, so I know a lot of people don't like aphids in their yard, but they are part of a healthy ecosystem, so they should be in your yard. There's even some plants that actually naturally have aphids on them, and it doesn't harm the plant. This is also a really cool one. This is a lacewing. You can see an egg, larva, as well as an adult. So these will eat thrips, they'll eat mealybugs, aphids, a lot of other creatures that a lot of people consider pests in their yard, but if you have them in your yard, you have a good ecosystem. This is one of the thrips as well. And what's really cool about all of these creatures, I actually photographed all of them on the same patch of sunflowers. So I know I briefly said this before, but like just a sunflower can be an entire ecosystem, which is really cool. And you can tell how small this thrift is because those are little balls there that's pollen from the sunflower. So they're pretty tiny. And I think
This is kind of a stupid question, but how do you know if you have healthy soil?
Repeat the question.
Tested or what?
so. She asked, how do you know if you have healthy soil? So there's a lot of ways you can tell. Healthy soil will also create healthy plants. I guess one thing you can do is actually just kind of go into the soil. If you see a lot of things like moving around, and I don't know if I have like a really good answer for that one. I would say like moisture content is a really good thing. Things that you're doing throughout the year can actually like leaving the leaves. That actually creates a really rich soil. I don't know if I have a really good answer for that. Sorry.
You can have nutrient deposit soils in California, for example, sandy soils. They don't have much, but there's plants there and the animals come, the insects and.
Yeah, so she was talking about different soil types. So you can have like, I know in Riverside, different parts of San Diego, you can have like alkaline soil. So different soil types that are native to your area. But if you're pretty much in this area, you're gonna have, you're not gonna have alkaline soil. I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I might have to get back to you. That seems like a kind of a complicated thing to answer. I'll get back to you.
I'm native plant gardening on a sand dune.
Oh, you are?
And I've got plants that are almost 30 years old in the front yard. Purple sage.
Where do you live?
Redondo Beach.
Oh, really?
Want to come over?
Sure. Okay.
You might have some leaves.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love sand dune bees.
We also have a bat.
You have a bat.
I've named Otis.
You have one bat.
One bat.
One
male,
bat, oh.
Female.
Oh, okay, cool. That's amazing.
So that's the big feature of the yard. Everybody comes over, wants to see bat. Oh yeah, I want to see your bat.
Yeah, oh, that's amazing. That's so cool. Yeah. Okay, so one good thing that you can do for your yard is leave the leaves, and I think this was started by Xerces Society, but don't quote me on that. I know they've been using it for years. So leaves are a great way to maintain a healthy biodiverse soil because one, they don't actually suffocate anything living in your soil, And also if you leave them, you'll notice like by spring, summer of next year, they're all completely gone. But they provide really valuable organic matter to healthy soil. They also work as root suppression and moisture retention. Butterflies, bees, wasps, they use them to overwinter. So I would recommend this opposed to mulching. So if you do mulch in your yard, I would say no more than like 2 to 3 inches. Because I know mulch can keep a lot of the moisture in your yard, but it can also suffocate a lot of things living in the soil. And it also can stop a lot of creatures from creating burrows in the ground. So it can stop a lot of bees if it's too thick. So bee houses, I know a lot of times people really love to have bee houses. So I'm not the hugest fan of them. But if you do have a bee house, there are certain things you should look for to have one in your yard. Also, if you do have a really healthy native ecosystem and you put a bee house in your yard and find that no bees are using it, you might find that it's because your yard is so great. They're like, oh, I have better options in this bee house. So I would take that as a compliment.
That makes me feel better.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with that one too, yeah.
Yeah. So this is a bee house I would recommend if you want to get one. This is from Wee Bee Houses. And you can actually see another model there. So this one is really great because it has a couple of different features that you should look for.
Can you hold that?
Sure. Yeah, I'm just gonna take it apart really quick here. So first off, it has these little cavities in here that you can actually take apart for cleaning. I don't know if anyone can see this online.
Yeah, you're
Okay,
showing
cool.
it. Bring it up to the camera.
Yeah, so you can actually take these apart for
Oh.
cleaning.
Oh.
And then what's also good about these is you should always get ones that are about 6 inches deep. And you want to take these apart because you want to clean them. So it's kind of like having a dog house. If you have a dog house that's outside, you leave it permanently out there and your dog just lives in there and you never clean it out, your dog can get very sick. So the same thing applies with bees. But then also you don't want to get one that you can just take apart. You also want to get one that has a drawer in the top. Because female bees can actually control whether or not they're laying a male or female egg. And they typically lay male eggs closer to the entrance and then females closer to the back, which is why males are typically smaller. They emerge first. So you want to get a drawer so you can actually put the cocoons in here. You can stuff some cotton in here too if it's kind of cold out, and they'll emerge in the order that they're supposed to.
So I'm sorry, could you say that again? You put what in there?
The cocoons.
Oh,
Yeah, so after you're done cleaning it out, and I actually found some YouTube videos. I think I put that next. I did not. I'll show you what it is in a second. But I have some YouTube videos coming up that actually gives you instructions on how to clean those bee houses out. So there are products that are basically they're saying that they are for bees, but they're not actually good for bees. So one of them is this bee brick, and I know this went viral a little while ago, and everyone's like, oh, this is a great way to help bees. You can put this permanently in your house, but there's really no way to clean it. And also, if you look, it's less than 6 inches deep, so it's not designed with bees in mind. It's a lot of people call it like bee washing, where you kind of create a product that like looks really good environmentally, but it's not functional. So this is a great example of that. So what happens if you have a bee house that you don't clean out? You can get a lot of mites on there, and it can impact bees that don't just live in your bee houses, because a lot of times with mating, they can spread the mites around. So if you already have a bee house that you can't take the cavities apart, one thing I would recommend doing is getting a paper straw that fits in there, and you can actually just unravel the straw at the end of bee season, and then once you're done cleaning off the cocoons, you can put them in the drawer. So yeah, there's a lot of good biodegradable paper straws. These are 2 really good instructional videos that will walk you through cleaning your bee house. So also I mentioned this before that you don't need to put water out for bees. If you do put water out for bees, guess which bee shows up?
Honeybees.
Bees. Yeah, so if you have a native ecosystem and you put in water out for bees, guess what bees you're encouraging to show up at your house?
I feel what you said. So really, if you put the water out for the bees, what?
It encourages honeybees, because honeybees are the ones that will.
honeybees.
Yeah. Not even bumblebees. In nature, like any native bees will get all of their hydration from plants, so you really don't need to do anything. Like the dew in the morning is enough. Sometimes there's even like petals that might show up in your yard. Occasionally, there are bees that will use water for nest building. Sometimes they do drink water as well, but you never need to put water out like this. Okay, so if you do find a grounded bee, I know this is kind of dark. This is a carpenter bee that was trapped in my friend's window. She was trapped all day because my friend was kind of scared of her. And she wasn't able to fly because she'd been trapped for so many hours. So if you do find a grounded native bee, first, I would never recommend giving them honey because honey can contain pathogens that you might spread between bees. If you do find a honeybee that's grounded and you know it's from like a hive that you have, then you can definitely give it some honey. But otherwise, I would recommend a mixture of 3 parts water and 1 part sugar, and just give that to them and they perk up. She flew away within like 10 minutes, I think. So yeah, she was really thankful. And I'm just gonna wrap it up here with some of my goals, and some of them I've accomplished so far, but I want to photograph all 4 of the endangered bumblebees in California. I've really been working on getting to number 2. We'll see if that happens next year. I'm gonna try and make it a big goal. Also, I want to encourage more people to get into community science, and then I really want to encourage more people to think, when they think of bees, to think of more than just honeybees, because as someone counted last year, it was Olivia Carroll who came out with the book, The Bees in Your Backyard. There's 1,643 species, recognized species as of last year. So that's so many more than just the 1 species of honeybee. Also want to help create and promote native landscaping bridges. So for example, with my friend Paloma, who had that rare bee and endangered bee in her yard, what happens if she moves and the people who move in just decide to put in a green lawn? So encourage your neighbors to just maybe put like a small patch of flowers, so these, not just bees, but other creatures have like options of places to visit and travel amongst. And then also I just finished a coffee table book for National Geographic, which hopefully I'll have completely done with all the writing next year. Also I had some bee flashcards, which was my goal to release these this year, and they finally came out. So I did a Kickstarter for them, and then I thought I had enough cards to last for like eternity, and then they sold out in like 9 days.
Oh my goodness.
And then I did a second print run based on the people who were asking for a second print run, and then those sold out in a month. So I'm on my 3rd print run, and I realized I'm not a business person, so I don't know how long I'm gonna keep doing that. But yeah, so that was I think it's my goals for this year. And I talked to someone about this earlier, I can't remember who, but this guy in Bristol, England, during the pandemic, he couldn't leave his house, so he made
that video.
Yeah,
I loved it.
this is an amazing documentary. It's free to watch. It's called My Garden of 1,000 Bees. This man just hung out in his backyard, which is just native landscaping, and made this amazing documentary. It's so much fun. So you guys should definitely check it out.
His photography equipment is phenomenal.
It's sort of ridiculous. Yeah, he does not hold anything in his hands. He like has built robots to hold cameras, and yeah, yeah. Yeah, thank you so much.
Are you able to stay a little longer for questions?
Yeah, definitely. Are you doing questions online or not?
We,
So what
Yes.
we're gonna do
You c-
is have just a few questions for starters, and Bevelle, who's in the back in British Columbia, will shut it down after a few minutes, but we have time for some questions. Do you have any?
Yes, yeah, I do. Do you belong to a club where, you know, you can have something in common about people that know about bees? I mean, this is like a whole new world for me.
Oh,
Watching what you're showing.
just repeat the question.
she just asked if I had a club that I belong to. I don't belong to a club. I just made a lot of friends with a lot of people in the ecology community. I have started doing outings with certain people, like I've been taking people to different parts of the desert, and we're looking at different plants out there, different bees that show up, especially early part of the year. So at the moment, that's it.
But it's, instead of a bird walk, it's a bee walk.
It's a bee walk. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
How about a bird and bee one?
Yeah, so when you're photographing the bees, I assume you have like a really good camera with a big zoom. But how close are you? Because I'm thinking, how can I ever see these? Like I was telling you about the ceanothus in my backyard, that when it blooms, it's covered with really hundreds and hundreds of bees. And how close can you get to them? Because I can't tell what anything is. I can't see
Oh.
that. But-
So normally I get within 5 inches to a few millimeters.
Oh,
So I have like a couple of tricks to get close. So like if you get familiar with like the phenology of bees, you can kind of see when they're slower. So a lot of male bees, early morning, late afternoon, because they're starting to get into the flowers, they're sleeping. So it's a good time to photograph sleeping ones. You can also tell if there's certain bees that only show up when it's really, really hot and the sun is like right directly ahead. You can actually just wave your hand over a bush or create a shadow. A lot of them will scatter. The ones that don't, that's the one you want to photograph because they'll just hang out. But yeah, honestly, if you just hang out for a very long time, like the Perdita minima, the potentially world's smallest bee, I was hanging out there for so long, they got used to me. I actually have a photo of one on my finger. So it was like within maybe about 4 or 5 millimeters away. So yeah, just kind of observing their behavior.
so, because I'm thinking, I don't think my eyesight's good enough to ever tell when anything is. And I'm thinking maybe you have to, for me, photograph something, like use your cell phone if you can get really close. And then you can, look at it later, blow it up and say, what was that?
Yeah, your cell
Okay,
phone works great,
yeah.
because I started with my cell phone for like the first 2 years I was doing this.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah,
A cell phone I have, thank you.
yeah, no problem.
Well, I was gonna say that, Jess Morton over here did a presentation on, the tiniest little bees and the colors were just, he did, what was it, the colors of insects or something like that.
I do not believe I had Perdita, however. That's,
Gorgeous. Oh, it was fabulous.
that I would love to photograph, but, Perdita they are lost.
Yeah, yeah, they're very, very nice.
Well, that sand mat that you had there, I don't know if you've all seen sand mat, you probably have had some in the cracks in your sidewalk, this tiny little flower. And that's what she was photographing, like this with Perdita about a half the size of the sand mat flower. They're tiny.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite genera of bees, so, yeah.
I was trying to pull those things out. You don't believe it.
So would you recommend as the next step from cell phone?
Next step.
So she just asked what's the next step from cell phone photography. If you are you just using your plain camera on your cell phone or no attachments? So there are macro attachments that you can get for under $30. If you have an iPhone, there's actually one that's designed for it, and you can actually shoot raw on your iPhone. So you can increase, like, it's a diopter basically, or a magnifying glass. So that's a really great step up. Also, if you have just a basic camera, there's a reverse ring mount, which I think you can get for probably $10. You basically take your lens off and you shoot through it backwards. So it's like binoculars, but turned around. So it turns any lens that you have into a macro lens, so you don't actually have to buy a whole setup.
Well, I think we'll wrap things up now. This has been absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.